I just want to set the stage a little bit. Dr. Schiff will present on the tentative 2014-15 budget. Then we will have a discussion among the board. I'm going to actually limit it to clarification questions. We'll have discussion about the budget in the action agenda at the appropriate place. And then we'll have committee reports and then comments from the board or comments from the public, which would include new business and then public input on the 14-15 budget. And then we'll continue on with the action agenda. So, Dr. Schiff, if you can present on the tentative budget.
My pleasure. Thank you, Mr. Kins. This evening I'll be presenting the 2014-2015 tentative budget. I'd like to start by reviewing the budget calendar and how we've come to this evening. We began our budget development process in October of the prior year, where all of our budget managers, which include our department heads as well as principals and directors, submit their tentative budgets to myself and our business administrator, Mr. Mahmood. At that time, we review each budget by each line. We make decisions about what to continue funding, what to reduce, what to add at that point. And then in January, I present the budget request to each of the 3 board committees that are responsible for reviewing each of their individual areas. We have 3 standing committees that have budgetary responsibilities. Those are the Education Committee, Operations and Human Resources. Education reviews everything that is educationally oriented, that is involved in the instructional and the curriculum programs. Operations are all things transportation related, buildings and grounds related, financially related. Human resource is all of our personnel management. On February 27th this year, all schools in New Jersey received their state aid figures, and at that point we have a relatively good understanding of what the revenue side of the budget is going to look like. On March 1st, which was a Saturday, the Operations Committee met for about half a day to review the superintendent's budget and to make decisions about what to present to the full board for review as the tentative budget. March 10th, tonight, the board will act on approving a tentative budget. The tentative budget is just that. It can change over time. Our next step after tonight is that for the next 6 weeks or so, the board will work in committees to make any additions, changes, subtractions to the tentative budget in an effort to come to this, back to this dais on April 28th to have a full public hearing on the finalized 2014-2015 budget, and then the board will vote on that budget that evening. What were our funding priorities in this budget? We are expanding our strategic planning priorities. Currently, we have Chinese at the elementary level as well as at ARIS. We are going to continue the program into the middle school and expand the program from Chinese 1 to Chinese 2 at the high school. I am recommending that we complete our one-to-one initiative. Our one-to-one initiative is the opportunity for all students in grades 5 through 12 to have a Chromebook in order to organize their work and to enrich and enhance the instructional environment. This is the fourth year of a 4-year phase-in plan. We are also preparing for PARC implementation. PARC stands for the Partnership of Assessment for the Readiness of College and Careers. PARC is the new national assessment that is done online that determines how well students across the country are mastering the Common Core state standards. This is a new assessment. Again, it's taken online, and the Chromebooks would be the medium by which the students would take this assessment. Also, another part, of our strategic plan help to improve our facilities while not increasing taxes in the community. We're doing that through the implementation of the Energy Savings Improvement Plan, which allows for capital projects to be completed and that the energy savings generated by those projects goes to pay for those projects. So in the next few weeks, the board will be receiving quite a comprehensive presentation working with Honeywell on what we anticipate will be funded through the ESIP projects. I wanted to talk a few minutes about the tax levy cap. The tax levy cap is actually in three different areas, three different components. The first area that constitutes the tax levy cap is a 2% increase off of the current year general fund tax levy. 2% of the current year's tax levy is about $1.6 million. That's one part of the tax levy cap. A second part is what's called bank cap, that in prior years, if we don't go up to the 2% and we don't accept any waivers, which I'll talk about in a moment, those monies are left in the bank that allows the board to raise the levy by that much in future years if it needs to do so without going out to the community for a vote. The third part are called waivers. There are a few different waivers that are available. We have a health care waiver of $482,000 and $482,491, excuse me. That health care waiver is allowed due to the fact that health care increases are happening well beyond the 2% part of the tax levy cap. The tentative budget maintains $1.3 million available in bank cap for the board to use in the future if it needs to do so. The estimated school tax rate, the levy is increasing by approximately 4.32%. That compares the current year's tax levy, about $82 million, to what we're looking at a levy next year at $85.6 million. That creates a property tax rate of 1.536, which is the multiplier that you would use to multiply times $100 of assessed property value. Last year's school tax rate was 1.467, and the proposed tax rate is 1.563, as I said, an increase of 0.069. So what is the effect on the average homeowner in the community? The average home is assessed at $363,900 this year, would see an increase of $252 for the year. One of the reasons for this increase is that our ratables, which are the taxable properties in the community, fell by approximately 2%. That's actually close to $120 million less in ratables than what we had in the prior year. This raises the tax rate by approximately 0.33. This may be difficult to see, but what this shows is that depending upon what your home is assessed at, what the increase in annual tax for those schools would be. You see highlighted in yellow the average home value, more if your home is assessed at a greater rate, less if it's assessed at a lesser rate. Hillsborough Township Public Schools is actually two townships or a borough as well as a township that fund the school taxes in our community. Millstone Borough has a separate school tax rate. The levy there is also increasing. It's increasing by 5.36%. We calculate their increase based upon an algorithm that is given to us by the State Department of Education. Their property tax levy is going up from about $800,000 to $850,000. The rate is increasing from 1.525 in the 2013 tax year to a proposed tax rate in 2014 of 1.574, an increase of 0.051. For the average homeowner in Millstone, they would see an increase of $165 for the year. Millstone's ratables also decrease. They decrease by less than 1%. This is a similar chart to Hillsborough. Again, you can see highlighted the average homeowner in Millstone Borough. Of course, less taxation if the assessment is lower and more if the assessment value is higher. Some significant cost drivers that we have within our budget. Healthcare is by far the largest. Our healthcare costs, we know what half of our year is because our healthcare is budgeted on or the healthcare increase is known for a calendar year, but we go to school over a fiscal year, so we have to predict what our healthcare would be the second half of the 2014-2015 school year. We are predicting that to be an increase of approximately 15%. That's certainly significant. We hope that those healthcare cost increases will come down, but that is the largest cost driver in our budget. We're also funding our strategic plan. The one-to-one initiative has a 4-year lease that's a part of it. That will be a standing expenditure within the budget, plus additional staff members. We also had unanticipated special education staff positions that were needed due to increases in enrollment and program design. This is actually here at our school, and we'll be hiring 5 new special education teachers. As I said before, we're preparing for the park assessment. If the district chooses not to move forward with the one-to-one technology initiative, we will still need to be purchasing computers to administer the park, which will remain on carts and used primarily for, I would say, weeks at a time in order to administer the park solely, and will not be part of the one-to-one initiative. Our energy costs are increasing by 28% over what is budgeted in current year budget. That includes a significant increase in electric as well as gas. We also have a fund balance, which is our surpluses that are left over at the end of the year. We typically spend about 97% of our budget. We have about 3% or so that's left over at the end of the year. Last year, we spent about 98% of our budget, dipping into that surplus by approximately $1 million or so. Now, this year, our fund balance looks like we will have a surplus above that fund balance of approximately $500,000. However, that decrease in fund balance last year is booked as a revenue in next year's budget. So how are we managing costs moving forward? We have made significant progress in trying to control healthcare. We do that both by changing healthcare providers when they are equal to or better than the current plan, and we have worked with our associations through the collective bargaining process to find more contributions and other ways to control the costs of healthcare. All of our employees are contributing much more and will continue to contribute more to their healthcare as time goes on. We use shared services and cooperative purchasing also to maintain costs in our district. This year, as an example, we've worked collaboratively with our Township committee, and the Township is actually linking into our phone system so they don't have to have a separate phone system, at a savings to the taxpayers of over $27,000 a year. We're very proud of our revenue generating that we have within our district. We have a program called the Children at Play program. This allows our kids that are in kindergarten for half a day for parents to pay tuition for them to remain in kindergarten for the second half a day. This is the 3rd year that we have done it, and we've generated close to $500,000 in revenue. This current year, we changed the starting time for the middle school and rebid all of our transportation contracts. As a result of that small change, we have saved over $1 million this past year in transportation efficiencies. We also started this year with a new program to help address the needs of children that have some emotional challenges. We have contracted with a group called Effective School Solutions, which provides therapy and mental health support for children who would have gone out of district to be in a more therapeutic environment. This has been very successful this year. We have 7 students who actually returned from an out-of-district placement and about 6 students who didn't have to go out to an out-of-district placement. They remained in our district in their local schools and had their needs satisfied through these additional interventions. Savings to our community was close to $250,000 with that program. We reduced our capital outlay in next year's budget. And the reason that we did that is we're going to be doing a lot of capital projects, including 4 roofing projects, 3 this summer, 1 next summer, using ROD grants. ROD stands for Regular Operating District. These are monies that are set aside by the state to pay for 40% of those roofing projects. Those are not dollars that have to be raised in the levy. These are dollars that are paid for by the state. And as I said before, we're also moving forward with the ESIP project, the Energy Savings Improvement Plan, which will pay for itself through the energy savings that those construction projects generate. However, in order to maintain $1.3 million in the bank cap, we had to make some difficult decisions. One was we scaled back what we were going to do in our one-to-one initiative. We're going to be hiring less staff than what we hoped to do initially, and we are changing the funding structure of how we're going to finance it. The funding structure is 4 years. Initially, it was 4 equal payments, but in years 3 and 4 of the lease, another lease is completed. So we took out a lease in order to put those projection units in all of the classrooms about 3 years ago. Those leases are coming due, which releases monies that would be available within the budget to fund larger payments in year 3 and 4 of the one-to-one initiative. Those changes will save about $350,000, but that wouldn't be enough to get to the $1.3 million. The board also needs to consider the possibility of privatizing nighttime cleaning staff. Currently, our staff that serves the district from 3 to 11, that cleans our classrooms, our hallways, that also helps to set up for events like tonight, as well as break down events like the one we're in tonight. Those positions, 35 of them, would be privatized. The savings from privatization comes from reduced wages as well as reduced health care benefits. What is being contemplated is a reduction from their hourly rate where they are to $12 an hour for cleaning, and if they have a Black Seal license, which allows them to service our boilers, it would be $14 an hour. Currently, they're making around $16 to $18 or so an hour, some a little bit more, some a little bit less. And the health care would be what would be allowable under the Affordable Care Act for those individuals. The savings of that is approximately $700,000. We would also need to consider privatization of our day-to-day as well as long-term substitutes. The day-to-day substitutes would not have a change in compensation. However, our long-term substitutes who are currently on contract would come off contract, would be paid a per diem rate of $130 a day, plus have health care consistent with the Affordable Care Act. That's very different than the health care that they currently have, as well as the daily wage that our long-term subs have as well. That would be a savings of approximately $250,000. Add that up, and that's where we would save $1.3 million in the banked cap. I want to just take a moment and talk about the relationship between the spending and how it affects the average homeowner. For every $100,000 change in spending, the average homeowner in Hillsborough Township, that change would be $3 for the year. So $1 million change would be a $30 change for the year for the average homeowner. This is another reason why taxes are going up. That's because state funding is not going up at a pace that is consistent with 2% or even close to how healthcare costs are going up. You can see by the chart behind me that the last few years are relatively flat. We received a 0.6% increase this year. That's approximately $140,000 on a $25 million state aid check. The year before, we received a fraction of a percent. For all intents and purposes, it was flat. And it has not come back to the state funding levels that we saw in 2009, where it was over $26 million. But Hillsborough Township Public Schools has had a long history of controlling costs, and when we compare our cost per pupil to the rest of the districts throughout the state, as well as similar districts, we continue to spend less. The chart behind me illustrates the total budgetary cost per pupil that is on the State Department of Education website for the most recent data that we have, which is the 2012-2013 budget. This is from the Taxpayer's Guide to Education Spending 2013, that the state spending as well as the similar district spending, and we're in a category with K through 12 districts that have 3,500 pupils or more, that Hillsborough spends approximately $1,100 less than the average school district in the state, as well as the average school district in our comparative group. When we look at total administrative costs per pupil, Hillsborough Township also spends less per pupil than the average district in the state of New Jersey, as well as our comparative group. Over, was that about $220 less per pupil that is spent on administrative costs. So what does the entire budget look like? The budget is broken up into three different areas: the general fund, grants and entitlements, debt service. And what is our total? The general fund is going up 2.79%. Grants and entitlements are decreasing about 17%, and that is what is directed from the Department of the U.S. Department of Ed asks us to budget about 85% of what our prior year's budget was. And our debt service is going down slightly, down 2.62%. Our total budget, the total tentative budget that you'll be voting on tonight, is an increase of 2.27% from last year's revised budgets. Just to highlight some key points, this tentative budget doesn't only maintain current programs, but it does expand on our strategic planning priorities. We are maintaining $1.3 million in the bank cap. The board will need to consider, in order to do that, privatization of nighttime cleaning staff as well as substitutes. And the annual tax rate for the average homeowner in Hillsborough will see an increase of $252 for the year, in part due to a rateable decrease of approximately 2%. I thank the audience and the board, and I'm available for your questions.